But let me hear you say, Roberto. Clemente. I said, Grandpa, what's the book about? He said, read the book first, then talk to me. So I open up the book and I start to read about a boy who had 7 brothers and sisters. And boy, did they love baseball. But they did not have enough money for a real ball. So guess what they used? A lemon. But they didn't want lemon juice to get in their eyes when they hit it. So they'd wrap yarn around it, and that was their ball. They didn't have enough money for a bat. So guess what they used? A stick. And they played with that lemon and that stick all day long. Now let me hear you say 8. Roberto turns 8 years old. He goes to his dad and he says, hey, Dad, can I have a bicycle, please? Well, his dad worked very hard to put that bowl of rice on the table. He did not have extra money to buy the bike. Did Roberto complain? Did Roberto throw a fit? No. He says, hey, Dad, I want to look at you, and I want to tell you something. Me and my brothers and sisters, we've been talking about you. We notice how hard you work, Dad, and we want to say, thank you, Daddy. I love you. And then the 8-year-old Roberto runs to the neighbor's house. I love your uncomfortable eye contact. You're so quiet and you're listening so good, you could retell this story to your family tonight. I got to give you a fist bump. You're a leader. You might be president of the United States one day. Roberto, the 8-year-old boy, runs to his neighbor's house, knocks on the door and says, hey neighbor, I'm 8 years old. I'd like a job so I can earn my own money and I can buy my own what? Well, the neighbor had 19 cats. So she gives Roberto this big empty jar. And Roberto, love how you're listening. Thank you, Michael Jordan, for listening so good. Carries this big jar 2 miles barefoot and fills it up with milk. Walks 2 miles all the way back, brings it to the neighbor so she can feed her cats. Guess how much money Roberto earned that day? $18, $10, $5, $50, 10, 1 penny. He earned 1 penny. He looked at that penny. He looked at that penny and he said, Yahoo! That is 1 more penny than I had yesterday. Goes and puts it in his piggy bank, and then he finds his brothers and sisters and plays baseball the rest of the day. The very next morning, where did he go? Knocks on the door. What does the neighbor give him? Big jar. How far does he walk? Barefoot. Fills it up with what? How far does he walk back? Gives it back to the neighbor so she can feed her what? How much money? What does he say? That's 1 more penny than I had yesterday. 5 years later, he takes this big bag of pennies, and what did he go buy? As he was riding off on that bicycle, his mom and dad said, that kid, he's going to be great one day. Some guy in a funny hat's going to travel around the world and tell his story 50 years after he dies. Why did his parents think he was going to be great? Did he work hard? Did he ever quit? He became this guy. This is Roberto Clemente. 3,000 career hits, 12 gold gloves, 13 All-Star games, 4 batting titles, World Series MVP, and he's got a statue in Cooperstown, New York at the Baseball Hall of Fame. I said, Grandpa Tony, that's the coolest story I've ever heard. He said, no, 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 grandson. Thanks for listening. I appreciate that. You're a leader. Thank you so much for listening quietly. He said, read the last chapter, grandson. I said, uh-oh, I'm sorry, Grandpa. I go read the last chapter. Do you know what this guy did when he took his Pittsburgh Pirates uniform off and put his regular clothes on? he found airplanes. And he made sure the airplanes were completely empty. Why? Because he wanted to load up those airplanes full of gifts and fly around the world and give poor people gifts. He'd get his buddy Jackie Robinson to sign a bunch of baseballs, and he'd load up the plane full of the balls. And he'd fly down to places like the Dominican Republic or Puerto Rico, and he'd give the kids baseballs so they wouldn't have to use a what? He'd get his buddy Willie Mays. Willie Mays and Jackie Robinson played right down the road at Rickwood Field. Willie Mays would sign a bunch of bats, and he'd load up that plane. Was he kind? Yeah. He was actually the most kind person in the history of baseball. There's an award named after him. It's called the Roberto Clemente Award. Guess what you got to do to win that award? Be kind. You got to be kind. Thank you for listening. You actually have to be the most kind person in all of baseball. Anybody know who won that award last year? He's real big and tall and plays for the Yankees. Aaron Judge is correct. Aaron Judge lives that way. Let's give him an attaboy. 1, 2, 3. Now, I've gotten to meet a lot of Roberto Clemente Award winners. Thank you for listening. You're dialed in. You could retell this story to your family later tonight. I think you will. I've gotten to meet Albert Pujols and Justin Turner and Clayton Kershaw and Cal Ripken Jr., even the guy that signed my drum, Rod Carew. And I said, hey, what's your favorite award? Is it the World Series? No. Is it home runs? No. What's their favorite award? The Roberto Clemente Award for kindness. Why? Because they understand something. That being kind to other people is more important than hitting a home run or winning a game. When you are kind to somebody else, guess what? They never forget that feeling. And they connect that feeling to your face. They might forget your name, they might forget something that you teach them, but they'll never forget that feeling that you gave them. Raise your hand if you've ever been kind to somebody else. Raise your hand if somebody's been kind to you. Raise your hand if somebody's been kind to you today. Well, Roberto Clemente inspired them to do that. Roberto's no longer alive, but I don't know how it works. Maybe if you say attaboy really loud, he still hears it. 1, 2, 3.